South African.
I have an identity crisis.
Oh dear, what can I say? Yeah, we immigrated at 44, so difficult.
I'm recording my lecture now, so
Okay.
Hi.
be aware. Nice to meet you all. So,
Hi, Michelle.
hi, Adam, and sorry, I can't see from your.
I'm Honor.
You're Honor, okay.
Yes, sorry. I was just getting my children lunch.
That is such a cool name. I like it.
Thank you.
Any of them aged 2 to 6? Honor?
Sorry?
Are any of them aged 2 to 6?
Yes, no. They're 7 and 11 now.
Okay, but still recent history.
Exactly.
And Neela, you the only other one there?
I think there were a couple more of us.
Yep, hi, I'm here.
Hi. Yep, hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Anyone else there? No? Okay, cool. So does anyone have any questions?
No, I'd just like to say thank you for using Zoom because Collaborate is an absolute nightmare.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is easier.
First Zoom, though.
So much easier.
It's nice. We can all see each other. We can all talk.
Yeah.
Now you can't see me. Let me put on my video. There I am.
So that's better. It's nice if we can all see each other.
Yes, it is better.
You'll be able to see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Right. So last week I turned it off by mistake when I was like flicking backwards and forwards talking to people. So I'm not going to do that this week. So we're doing 2 to 6. Did you see the? Oh, I actually might do this. Did you see that I put up a Padlet? Do you all know what Padlets are, and that you just use them? Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Cool. Have you used a Padlet? Have you looked at the Padlets at the bottom of each week? Anna?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so at the bottom of each week, I'm going to escape from here for a second and just remind me to share my screen again. So each week there is at the bottom of the Blackboard page, something that looks like this.
Right. Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah. The TED Talks.
Yeah, TED Talks, anything that I kind of see that I think is interesting. This week I thought, have you ever seen any of the movies from that 7 Up series, which is it's a longitudinal, it's based on a longitudinal study. And it just follows a whole lot of children from 7, 14, 21 from, I think it was from 1956 or 1957.
Yep.
And it just goes through their lives and like checks in on them every few years. And it's tied to the British longitudinal study, which this person, Helen Parsons, talks about there as well. So it's just looking at the influence of like social class and hereditary on children's lives and on their life outcomes. But then, of course, there's a Harvard study as well, which refutes this and says that your ultimate kind of your ultimate happiness in life is going to be tied to how the quality of social connections that you have. So once again, I know that we're seeing this all the time. There's all these different kind of theories that are kind of challenging each other all the time. But this stuff's really interesting. I especially recommend the journalism series.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just writing everything down.
Sorry?
I'm just writing stuff down as you're talking.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Right, so now I'm going to go back to PowerPoint. Sorry, I've got so much stuff open. There we go. Okay. Now, you should still be able to see the share, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share it again. All right. Hopefully it works this time. Right, so we're going to go through the PowerPoints together and discuss them. So there's some interesting facts in here about how much children grow each year, how much they weight increases, and we've all seen, babies when they're born, they tend to be nice and fat, and as they get up and start walking around, some of that baby fat drops off and they become leaner. especially as they grow from kind of toddlers into older children. Girls have more body fat, boys have a higher muscle mass. You lose baby teeth, and of course we don't see much evidence, or we don't see many children with malnutrition in Australia, but you can definitely see the effects when we see people from third world countries and other marginalised places. Has anyone got anything to add there?
I've got something interesting. My grandson visiting from WA last week, they arrived last week, he's actually got a twinned tooth. So when he got his adult teeth, one of the teeth actually twinned when it formed. And they both came out, and quite a genetic thing, I think, probably, or yeah, just a mistake. But that was quite interesting. Didn't even know something like that could exist. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and I know that my son has some genetic things with him as well. He's got a little ear tag growing out of his ear.
Yeah.
He's got another little nipple that's growing down under here, and he's also got this patch of skin which looks like a kind of a mat on the back of his arm, which is completely different skin here.
Sorry, I had to put that on silent, actually. There you go.
It's a completely different skin colour to the rest of his skin. So
wow.
Interesting to see. You know, we can see it. We don't. I think like the genetic influence is something that I've been less aware of. I tend to think myself more in terms of environment and nutrition and lifestyle and things like that. Does anyone else have a kind of way that they've traditionally seen the world, or that this course might be challenging a little bit?
Not really for me, because I've studied nutrition, so we did like genetics, like we looked at genetics at uni as well as the nutrition component. So everything that I've learnt so far in this particular course has been like on track with what I've already learned. Okay. So you've had more of a kind of a medical kind of influence on your thinking, whereas I think my whole entire career has been more in terms of social science. So I tend to think first in terms of social science, whereas you're obviously thinking first in terms of genetics and things like that. Probably I'm more prone to do that, and I'm finding it fascinating learning through counselling.
Yeah, I'm finding it very fascinating to learn about this in general. I've just had my first child, so I've never thought about any of this stuff until very recently. So I'm kind of it's now like I'm a little bit lost in it all, if I'm honest. But yeah, I'm slowly getting my head around it. It's all exceptionally interesting. I love it.
Yeah, and I think, Adam, what you will find over time is like as you learn more and more of the theories, and you kind of start to form your own opinion based on the kind of the theories and the the evidence that's being presented to you, then the theories will start to make more sense in terms of one another, rather than just be kind of isolated ideas, which is how they tend to land at the beginning. I always like to think of it, it's like we have like a wardrobe, and at the beginning it's like everything's kind of disorganized in the wardrobe, but then after a while things will start to fit together in terms of color or style, and then you might rearrange the wardrobe as well to have all your shirts in one place and all your pants in one place instead of color coordinated. So I kind of think about how we come to understand.
I've found it very interesting to study theory, because it's like there's no concrete, it's just theory. It's like we're all discussing and having conversation and learning about things that people have theorized about. There is evidence to suggest, obviously, these things are real and whatnot. So it's kind of like it's very different for me. Most of my study's been based on evidence and fact, and this is very stretching. So it's very exciting. It's very good.
Yeah. All right. So we see rapid growth in infancy, and then it slows down in early and middle childhood, and then rapid growth again in adolescence, of course, especially around adolescence, around the time when children go from being kind of children to developing into their older selves. And it's like, I know my son, he went from about 5'8" to about 6'3" in about a year and a bit. It was just amazing. So around this area, around this time of 2 to 6, we see not such rapid growth. I think this is a really interesting little fact. The brain increases from 70 to 90% of its eventual adult weight between the ages of 2 to 6.
Can I just interrupt for a moment?
Sure,
I'm
Gina.
not getting your slide on my screen. I was to begin with, and now it's gone.
Have you maximized the conversation box so it's just the person who talks?
Yes.
So you go to the bottom top of the box, and you should see it, one with 4 squares, one with little square, one with big square.
That was there before, and now it's changed.
Yes.
And I haven't touched anything. So
if you hit the 4 square one, it should fix it. Hopefully. No, it's not there.
No. I swap between seeing all of you to whoever's talking, but the screen, Michelle's screen's disappeared. It says I'm viewing her screen, but it's not there. I might just leave and then I'll come back in and see if that fixes it.
No worries.
Okay.
Sorry.
Cool. So we'll see a diagram a little bit later, but there's a lot of, obviously, when the brain's increasing from 70 to 90%, there is a lot of formation of and regeneration of cells throughout this period of development. Oh, that's better. So brain development. So there's lots of things happen, like up until 2. Children and toddlers have one way of being in the world, and then in this period between 2 and 6, we see a lot of fine motor skills development, changing in the way children think, more being able to give attention to things for longer, like having long imaginary games. Anything else anybody else has noticed with children in this?
Their personalities actually start to show up. I found that with my grandchildren, and the interesting thing is, even though they've got the same influences and the same parents, the same area, they're 2 total different entities, 2 total different people, and that's really interesting as well.
Yeah, because for me, from my background, it's like I did a lot of my postgraduate study in the early 1990s, and it's like during that time it was like the nature-nurture debate has gone on throughout history, as we've seen in this subject, and during that time it was very much in favour of it's all about environment and nurture and the way that we speak to our children, and it's got very little to do with kind of genetics and inheritance. Now, because it was like over 20 years ago, almost 30 years ago, I think now what we're seeing is like a swing back to more of a belief in that there is a genetic and a hereditary influence.
Yeah, hugely, yeah.
And yeah, that's when
be completely opposite each other.
Sorry, Anna, can you say that a bit loud?
Yeah, sure. I was just saying, I think you see that when you raise 2 children, environment, yet, my 2 daughters couldn't be more different. So one's really bold and brave, and the other one's like more reserved. And it's just interesting watching the play out of the genetics through each of them, and how we can nurture that to develop the best.
Yeah,
I find that interesting.
Yeah, something that I found really interesting is like my oldest son, who's now 28, when he was about 25, he grew up between my house and my ex-partner's house. So he basically had 4 parents who were, very involved with his life. And when he was about 25, he said, all of you, I'm an introvert. And we were like, what? It's like all of us are really quite extrovert, and we didn't even know.
Yeah. Do you notice that that's a trend? Sorry if I'm taking things off track, but do you notice that's a trend with children of extroverts tend to be introverts? Like there seems to be...
I don't know. I'd never thought about it. That's interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
I notice that sometimes if the parents are overly dominant in one particular field, then it's almost like at least one child has picked up the slack of a duality sort of thing.
Well, in this case, he had 4 parents who were all really extroverted. So
interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. That'll be, You can see how people come up with research topics, can you?
Yeah.
I don't think that's not something I've actually ever seen anybody do any research on, actually.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. And in terms of, I've got a really good example in terms of spatial skills, so like drawing and recognising shapes and things happening. It's like I noticed the other day that I went through some stuff that we were throwing away, and I noticed that I'd kept drawings from both of my children from when they were around this kind of age where they start drawing birds and things like that, because it's such a big as a parent you recognise it's such a big kind of conceptual shift for them, because before their paintings and drawings didn't really make sense, and then all of a sudden they start to make sense and you're like, oh my god, you're so amazing.
Totally.
Yeah. So the cerebellum, which is located at the base of the brain, becomes linked to the cerebral cortex. So that's why children get better at balance and body movement and things like that, and start doing yoga with you when you do it, instead of just like coming and rolling and lying under you. That's my experience anyway. Anybody else got anything that illustrates this period, this kind of element of brain development?
I think my daughter lost out on that one. She's got really bad balance.
There's a theory around that as well, that when you start to play with your balance, and when you start to try and balance, that's that kind of, if you do that early, then that stays with you through your life.
Yeah. And with our surname being Balance, that's really funny.
It's quite funny, isn't
Oh
it?
yeah, your surname.
And my husband's got Menias, which makes it really freaky.
Okay, so we've got brain development here. We've got lots of synapses developing, and we've got myelination of the corpus callosum, which connects the two hemispheres of the brain. This also peaks at this age, and this is partly why people get more coordinated, better at balance and things like that, and helps with things like attention and memory, language, and problem solving. So I think this is quite a nice diagram, isn't it? It's like, it shows like, at birth there's not very much going on. By 3 months it's really, really increased, but by 15 months there are a lot more neurons, and I would assume that in this stage that we're talking about now, there will be again a lot more. It's almost like it's like an exponential kind of growth in a way, isn't it? So, hereditary and hormones. So the child's size and rate of growth are related to genetic factors. I often see people kind of discussing their child in terms of where they fit on the, in New Zealand we have Plunkett, but on the Plunkett kind of scale, and people will say, oh yes, he's in the 90% percentile, or, yeah. So we're very aware of this, aren't we? We're very aware of our child's growth, and often people will say, oh, his granddad's really big, or his grandmother was really small, or I don't know how I got this really small children. There's no one in my family like this. So I think this is something that is quite well accepted in society. So there's the pituitary gland, which is located at the base of the brain. So that produces a growth hormone and a thyroid stimulating hormone. So we need these things for the body to develop in a normal kind of way. And when people have thyroid issues, they often get really tired. Children won't grow properly, but people with thyroid problems can either be very tired, or they can actually be kind of overstimulated and just like running around all the time. So thyroxine is very much tied to our kind of the balance in our body.
And anxiety, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, if you have too much thyroxine.
Yeah.
And also you can develop cancer as well, thyroid cancer.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting one, because I had one of my children who ate peas, corn, carrots, broccoli, those things he used to call green ears, which are basically pasta with cheese in the middle, milk Wheat Bix with sugar and bananas, and that was about all he ate for about 5 or 6 years. And I used to be so worried about him, but he's huge. I mean, it clearly had no, and not fat, but he's just a very big person. But it clearly had no influence on him. And children are actually quite adept at eating what they need to eat under normal, given a range of foods to choose from. So although we tend to worry as parents, we probably shouldn't worry as much as we do. Were there any surprises that you've noticed with children, like loving olives or?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Olives, my children, and the foods that I ate during pregnancy were very different. So I was basically a vegan when I had my first child, which wasn't ideal, but it's just how I was at the time. And so I was eating lots of legumes and lots of Mediterranean type food like hummus and different things like that. And that daughter still craves those foods. She'll ask for mung beans and she'll ask for red kidney beans and she'll ask for olives. And then my other child, I was eating meat by that stage and a lot of dairy, and she really enjoys those sorts of foods. So they say that when we're eating those foods when we're pregnant or breastfeeding, then it kind of gives those tastes to the child that sets up genetically like a favorability, perhaps.
That is really interesting. I had the same experience with my son. I was vegetarian when I was pregnant with him, and when he was young, and he's never eaten meat ever.
Oh wow. Wow, has he not wanted?
He people have said to me, "Oh, that's awful, not feeding your child meat," and I'd go, "Fine," and they'd give it to him, and he'd just spit it out.
Yeah, wow, yeah. So they say that their taste buds are programmed.
Yeah, it does make sense, doesn't it? That's really interesting. Is that from your nutrition degree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interviewing different scientists. I was a journalist as well.
Oh, okay. Because that really makes sense of cultural difference as well, doesn't it? Of, cultural tastes being kind of inscribed in the womb. Interesting, thank you. Okay, so injuries. I was a very accident-prone child, but not at this age, not until I was older. But evidently, accidents are a greater risk during the preschool years than illness or nutritional problems. So we've seen that nutritional problems are much more self-correcting than we seem to think they are. And I also think in places like Australia, it's like childhood illnesses are not as much of an issue as they might have been in the past. It's really interesting to see that accidents are the greatest risk. And again, I think there's a cultural inscription here as well, where boys are encouraged to take more risks than girls.
Opposite in our family, my granddaughter fell backwards out of a window 4 feet above the ground and landed on her bottom and didn't have any harm done.
Lucky.
Yes. But she's our crazy child anyway, so there you go.
Yeah, and it's like, yes, I'm sure that there are, there are genetic and influences on boys and girls' development, but it's not something that I would have immediately seen. And like you just said, Nilo, it's like some children are just more boisterous than others as well, aren't they? So I think genetics is part of it perhaps, but also it is I believe it's very culturally inscribed.
She likes gymnastics and stuff like that, where her brother is the thinker. He's the quieter one. So Kiara would do gymnastics, etc., etc. And she was sitting on the windowsill watching television and fell out the window backwards. Luckily, she grabbed on and she did a back somersault, and then that's how she actually stopped herself from falling immediately, and then just let go and rolled into a ball.
Can you see us now? Can you see
yes, I can. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm crossing my fingers that it's actually going to record like this time, because last time it looked like this to everybody, but but when I went to upload it, PowerPoints went no.
Oh.
Okay. So by the age of 3 children can jump through a rope, skip, run. So we see all those things that children do in the playground. And between 5 and 6, we get upper and lower body skills combining. Excuse me. Again, sex differences in growth patterns result on average in boys being more developed in gross motor skills such as running and jumping, and girls are generally more developed with regard to fine motor skills, skipping and hopping. But again, that's like my question here would be how much of this is actually genetic and how much is culturally inscribed. Okay, so we've got Piaget. Piaget's pre-operational stage. So this is where a period of both stability and change. And what we see here is an increase in representation and symbolic thought. So children become better at talking to themselves about things, and they're less kind of, grabby and touchy and getting sensations from that in the world. One thing that I've noticed, that I really noticed with a lot of children that I've been around, is that they develop this need not to kind of be so so hands-on with their toys, and then their toys, they will sort of start playing with them. They'll have imaginary games. Children will talk to each other. It's like, boy and girl dolls will kind of get married in that flower over there, and it'll all turn sparkly, and they can spend hours and hours and hours playing by themselves, which is actually quite a relief and quite nice in some ways. Anyone else got anything to share with the pre-operational stage?
Definitely 5 to 7 is like the 6 to 7. Yeah, there's a lot more solo play that can go on.
I was actually thinking about about 3 and 4 year olds.
3 and 4 year olds, yeah.
And they kind of go from sticking blocks in holes and pushing trucks around to actually having they'll have the doll sitting on the truck, and the doll will be what's happening there, and they'll be able to explain to you.
Yeah, what's happening.
I wonder what influence all the iPads, iPhones, etc., will eventually have on children, even at that age. They're not playing, they're sitting with these devices, and
I wonder if that does limit their kind of capacity for symbolic thought, because they're actually being kind of dragged into something which is much more. It's much more. Well, it's not symbolic, is it? It's much more. How would you say?
Yeah.
It's
not tactile, really, is it?
No, we're not talking about tactile. It's not symbolic. They're not forming their own symbolic thoughts. They're actually just passively receiving something rather than actively imagining something.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. But then again, a different area of the brain might develop as far as, let's say, lateral thinking goes, etc. I suppose it'll be very interesting in a couple of years to see what we have.
Because the technology is definitely changing us.
Yeah.
In fact, I've done quite a lot of thinking in this area, and I don't even know if it's so much that technology is changing us. It's like that we are changing with technology.
Yes.
So we've become so integrated with our kind of devices that they are now kind of a part of us.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, Honor, I can't hear you.
They are almost like a limb.
Yes.
To us.
Yes, so it's like we're a cyborg culture, and that they were so kind of connected to our devices that we almost can't live without them. Like if we forget our phone or our iPad or our computer when we're on the way to work or something, we'll definitely go back and get it, because you can't almost function for a day without technological assistance.
Well, what could you do without them? That's the question. That's it. What could you actually do?
Mine's my office.
Yeah. So it's not just social interaction. It's not just fear of missing out, FOMO. It's actually more than that, isn't it? It's like what could you do without it?
100%.
Yeah. And it's got a name. It's called non-monophobia.
Oh, okay. Non-monophobia.
Interesting.
So I wouldn't think that that devices would be impeding language acquisition. In fact, they might even be improving language acquisition and improving people's vocabulary, because it's not just their zone of proximal. It's not just the people in their kind of immediate family that they're having so much access to, because they've got the device. They've got so much access to people and their ways of speaking and their languaging outside of that nuclear family and, you know, the immediate environment around them. But I do think that I do actually really think that it is will have an impact on people's ability to imagine and create.
Yeah.
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 You no longer have to imagine as much. You can see what you desire to see. You can create it even on a phone.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Even interacting with others, I think socially, that will change. Well, it
Oh
already.
yeah, I think it already has.
Yeah.
We're doing an online course, for crying out loud. That's changed so much.
That's right. And it's like, although we can see each other and we're talking to each other,
Yep.
not being in the same room with each other, we don't have as many cues to body language. I can't hear Honor quite as well as I would like to. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's a layer in between us, which is in some way impeding our ability to relate to each other.
But it's also enhancing our ability to learn, like how another way, instead of social cues, whether they're physical, verbal, non-verbal, all that sort of stuff. This is a whole new medium we're learning.
Yeah.
To connect with people on. I do most of my stuff via Zoom with people all over the world. So it's conversations all the time and learning that there's different nuances when we're on a video than there are when we're sitting face to face.
And also you have a preference for Zoom, don't you? You like Zoom. I love Zoom too. It's like once people have used Zoom, they don't like other things, even though if we had to say if we had to really list what's the difference, you know, between Zoom and other things, it's like we could probably write a list of things, but actually it's just a nicer experience.
Yeah, it's just easy.
Mm.
It's like Apple versus Microsoft. Apple's a lot easier.
Whereas when you go to Blackboard, it's like, well, this is a technology that was created 20 or 30 years ago, which has been slowly kind of updated, but you just can't update it in the same way as you can a totally new one.
And a Mac, the collaborative on a Mac, you can't actually access the old videos. You don't have the tabs that you do have on the Microsoft. So it's really frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Are you an Apple snob, Adam?
No, I've got a Samsung phone, but I've got my Apple computer
Me too.
Apple computer's better in my opinion, but the phones are too limited for me.
Yes.
With what I want to do. But
I'm wondering if being able to connect in the way we are at the moment, whether we will learn to read between the lines, because we don't have the specific body language. We've only got a little area, and we choose to allow people to see what we allow them to see.
that's it. We can choose to engage on whatever level we choose to engage on.
Yeah.
Like I can answer a text message without my lecturer seeing because I can lift it down here.
I did it.
But then, you know, back in the old days of the I saw someone in the supermarket. Was it in the supermarket? No, in the garage the other day, and they had one of those old cell phones.
Oh dear.
And they were saying how they can't do it anymore, but they used to be really, really good at doing it under the desk without looking, so the teacher couldn't see. So I think, Adam, that might be something that people have always done.
Yeah, maybe.
Press A 3 times to get a C, or 1 3 times.
So Piaget would say, let's go back to here, Piaget would say that in this period, that children are very egocentric. They find it really hard to see things from other people's perspective. And even like sometimes I think that it's like they can't even see beyond where they are in that moment, because I'm sure, well, Adam, you've probably got this still to come, but I'm sure all of us who have had children and have grandchildren know that there's this kind of period where getting children out of the house, getting them to put their shoes on, even if they are going somewhere which is a treat for them or which they really want to go, can be really, really hard. And it's because they are the centre of the universe, and we're just kind of there to facilitate in their time, not ours.
I love that though. I can't wait for the center of the universe.
Can you?
Yeah, I mean, because I had, you know, my childhood was my parents were present physically but absent emotionally. So for me, I'm looking forward to seeing what having an emotionally present father and mother will do to my child. So I'm looking really forward to the turmoil of that, because I think there's going to be a lot for me to learn in those moments with my own development.
Yes.
So I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah.
No, it's a nice example.
Especially with this behind your back, Adam. This is excellent. I think every parent should do this.
Yeah, that's it.
Before they have kids, anyway.
Yeah.
It does help you make sense.
Now, like you've done it when your child is 1 or 0.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's important to me to do that because of my experience, I guess, motivated by wanting to have a healthy human and not having to have him do the 15 years of becoming healthy that I had to do.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
I'm 34 having a child because there was no way 15 years ago that I could even consider being in a relationship, let alone having a child, because I was just so messed up, which is okay. Like, it's fine, but yeah.
It's your journey.
That's it.
And it's also, I think, having had those journeys when you're studying to be a counsellor is never a bad thing. It does help you to kind of empathise with other people and understand other people's experience, even if it's not the same as your own. The fact that you've had a journey.
Yep, absolutely. I think we've all had one, if we're honest.
Yeah.
But some people are less aware than others.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
On the journey, I think that one thing that having counselling does is help you to be more aware of that. And a lot of people I find coming to, some of these subjects where you have to reflect, it's like if you've never reflected before, that can be an amazingly difficult learning journey.
Yeah, exactly it. It's I'm glad I did a lot of self-reflection and counselling and psychology. My mentor's a psychologist, a Christian psychologist guy, so he's walked me through a lot of stuff. So I'm glad I did, 4 or 5 years of that before I even considered doing this, because I'd be a mess in a heap.
Yeah. I know people do say that, especially with the I'm not sure if you guys are doing the diploma or the degree, but the 100 level degree subject is basically all about interpersonal communication. So it's basically going, oh, I do this and I do that, and then it's like, okay, so let's look at what happens when you do these particular things, or if you try changing them. And often it's like, was I like that? Was I like that?
Yeah, it's very self-actualizing.
But also challenging, Adam. Also challenging.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, yeah, if you choose to do it, not everybody actually chooses.
It's true.
Our discussion forum question this week, I was just looking at it and I thought, I can't remember what time I went to bed when I was little, or even if my parents read to me. It's really weird, but I can't. But I'm going to phone my 90-year-old aunt, and I'm sure she'll remember. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting to think about Vygotsky and, when he was writing, because he was obviously writing in a time where we didn't have devices.
Yeah.
So learning for him was definitely taking place within the zone of proximal development. But is it now?
Yes.
I think it is, but it's very different because we're a generation that I can go, okay, so I've got this behavior XYZ. Why might I be doing that? Type it into Google and find 6 different ideas of why that might be happening, and actually self-counsel. If I understand what question to ask, I can find a pretty good answer on Google. Now, I wouldn't suggest that to people, but we're in a civilization where it is still personal development, but we're not the I can't say his name, Gotskys, who created the theories. We're the ones going, all right, let's refine this, because it's continuing to grow. So I think personal development is at its greatest peak at the moment, especially within the millennial generation. I don't know if there's any more millennials here, but within the millennial generation, me and my wife run a ministry for young adults, and just seeing how they interact and react and act, which is different towards adults. Like, we have to have nights that we call conversation nights instead of, Bible studies, or have nights that we call live nights where we interact with them on an emotional level, or have activations where they can participate, because there's a whole different learning style in this generation that's coming through now.
I think that you're pointing out something really interesting here, which is like that for millennials, they often sat and unless they kind of got together with their computers and joined them all up and had like a LARP, a live action role play or something where they played games together, they didn't actually, they were playing their games in isolation from one another, which is different to what we've got now with Generation Z, where although they are not together in a room, they're together like we are, and that they can see each other and they can hear each other while they're playing their games.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, Adam, you'll probably find that the need for those kinds of things that you're doing, which are just like, you know, let's talk and let's interact and let's like role play, and it sounds like role play and model thing, might drop off over time as you have this new generation coming through where the needs are going to be different.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. We're always having to adapt. We've had to adapt our course 4 times in the last 6 months just to keep people interested.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's very challenging because we have to be creative, but also we need to learn this stuff because we need to know, like, what are the actual options that we can do now? Like,
well, it was like have you heard of My Little Pony and the brony phenomena, where you had like young men in their kind of early 20s who started watching My Little Pony, which is a children's television, a children's. I
know My Little Pony, but I can't imagine 20-year-old men watching it.
Exactly, but this is the generation of men who didn't interact with each other, and they were learning emotional skills from watching the children.
That's awesome. See, I love that stuff. That's great.
Yeah. But again, that's kind of a phenomena that's kind of dropped off in popularity.
Yeah.
But interesting. So yeah.
Very interesting.
Vygotsky, look where Vygotsky has taken us.
Vygotsky.
Critique of Vygotsky. So during this 2 to 6 year age group, we've got the children develop this ability to kind of curb their impulses, so they can start to see things in terms of other people a little bit more and realise that an action has a consequence. And they like to have things where they have to plan a little bit more in terms of their games and things as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm laughing at the games that my girls often want to play, or that have wanted to play around this age bracket, and it's always making potions. So like getting anything out of the cupboard that they can find and just tipping it in and stirring.
Yep. Making coffee. I can remember stealing my grandmother's coffee machine and putting sand on the top of it and pouring water through it.
Teach them how to make a cookie potion and just make it cookie dough, you know, like.
We just had a bake-off today. Where they made cakes.
Nice. Yeah, and they like doing stuff like that. Yeah.
It's great.
So we see development of mental abilities as well. So being able to remember things, places, road directions is always, very 3 and 4 year olds knowing the way is always really blew me away the first time I was directed somewhere by a 4-year-old.
I've been directed by a 3-year-old.
Yeah, it's amazing. They actually have a memory. They've developed a memory.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you can go, this way and that way, and know you're going the wrong way. Where are you going?
Oh.
And we have this. Oh, hello. Very.
Thought I'd distract everyone.
Yeah.
I can't see.
You should have had them there last week. 0 to 2. Hello.
Yes, all good.
Okay.
Adam, you'll have all the grandmothers drooling.
Yeah. I had a grandmother say to me the other day, which disturbed me. Oh, my womb is hurting.
Oh.
Not quite, but.
I really don't want to think about that.
Nah.
Okay, so in terms of what's happening in for 2 to 6 year olds, we have like advances in memory. And we have this thing called metacognition happening, which is being able to think about thinking. It's closely related to the idea of mentalizing, which is also thinking about thinking. And it's like we as humans can think about thinking, but animals, and especially dogs, also think about thinking. So it's like, you say it's like walking, and the dog goes,
oh yeah,
and then it's like, but are we really going for a walk? So yeah, we have this. We develop at around this age this ability to think about thinking. So we get more kind of language. We get better at thinking things through. We've got our make-believe play, where we kind of in our make-believe play we think about the consequences of actions because we're making up a story, and we also have our more social experiences to draw on. But you, Jetta?
Oh, it's cutting out. I'm having a problem with the internet, I think.
I suggest that you download the app onto your phone for future.
Oh, okay.
It's much better on the phone. It's better on the phone anyway.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, because it just keeps cutting in and out.
Zoom just gets better and better with everything that you do with it.
You like Zoom?
I spent a lot of time on Zoom.
I'm going to look it up a little bit more, learn a little bit more about it, I think.
Okay, so we've got children developing literacy, being able to point to something in a book, they can tell you what it is. They start to figure out what symbols display. So if you showed a young child even before they had, I can't see that very well. If you showed a young child a symbol like this one over here, even before they could read, they would most likely know that that meant that there was danger or a fire or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you get, although most children can't actually read in terms of reading, they can tell what symbols mean, and they also can, if you read them a book over and over, for example, they can follow the rhythm of the language, and so when you move your finger under a word, they'll know whether you're in the right place or the wrong place, even though they're not actually. Does anyone have any experiences to add?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Didn't hear what?
I didn't hear what you had to say, then it went, I must have...
Oh, okay, sorry. I said, has anyone got any other experiences of children of this age, not necessarily understanding the language, but being able to tell you what's going on because they understand symbolic language?
McDonald's, Hungry Jack's, Woolworths, Coles, Aldi, all those, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got one with the grandchild with Aktung, the crocodile warning up north. Yeah, whenever she sees a picture, she knows there's crocodiles about. Sees that word, actually, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Achtung.
Aktung.
Aktung baby.
It's attention in German, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But she says it means crocodile.
Clever, very cute.
She lived in a river with crocodiles.
Be careful of all the Achtungs.
Yes.
Okay, so we're moving from Vygotsky to Erickson here. According to Erickson, this is a time when a lot happens for children. They establish themselves as autonomous individuals, separate from their parents. And this is a time where if children are excessively criticised or threatened, or if their parents are just inconsistent, for example, their experiences can become negative, because children don't want to have negative experiences. They don't want their caregivers to be doing things wrong, and often they will internalise things and that it's themselves that are doing the wrong thing rather than because they have the need for the parent to kind of be there and to be the person taking care of them, and that's so strong. And I'm sure you've done a lot of work here, Adam. I can see you looking out the window. Yeah.
I think this is a time that you could also make and break a child, or make or break a child. It's a very crucial period in their lives.
It is a very crucial period, yeah.
Do you think with this kind of thing that, in my experience, I would say that the damage was done, but it can be undone?
Oh, absolutely, it can be undone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not it's almost like sometimes we talk about this stuff like it's an inevitable, this is it. You're screwed now. I think
another thing to think about when we're learning these theories is that they were written at a time where it was very much about the nuclear family, and it was people didn't question the fact the nuclear family was it and the most important thing in a child's life, whereas a child can have someone else in their life that they attach to, who might not necessarily be a primary caregiver. And so that's
I love
sorry?
attachment theory. Attachment theory is just awesome.
Attachments, awesome, agree. Michelle, question. So our two grandchildren that live in the same town as us, would we be part of their nuclear family because they have a bedroom in my house, they come for sleepovers, we have dinner there once or twice a week and vice versa. Would my husband and myself be part of their nuclear family, or would the nuclear family still just be mommy, daddy?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Really, is that I think that although the nuclear family was taken to be the most important thing and the primary thing, it's like I personally don't think in this day and age and even in the past, that's actually the sum total of the influence.
Yeah.
On a child, and sometimes a grandparent, on an auntie, or et cetera, can be the person that the child is primarily attached to. And it's regardless of, not regardless, but it's not to do, I think, with how often they see that child. It's to do with the unconditional positive regard. And I can't remember who it is, but one of the theorists said that every child needs someone who basically thinks that the sun shines out of their bottom.
Yeah. Would you say that this is a very Western way of looking at it as well, though? Because if you jump onto the Eastern culture side of things, a nuclear family would look like a village. And I love that stuff. So I kind of wish I was on the other end of the world. But the way we look at things is so like Western sometimes that we lock ourselves into this mindset.
And it's totally, it's never too early to start thinking about these things. You will have to be writing them into your assignments as time goes on.
And find your baby lots of grandmas and grandpas.
Oh, we got a whole church full of them.
Good on you, mate.
We hand them over.
Good. Excellent.
So preschoolers begin to develop their self-concept. And they're very, very kind of concrete in how they describe themselves as well. They usually know how old they are, in 2 years and 3 months or whatever. They know what their name is. They know whether they're a boy or a girl. They'll tell you about stuff that they've got. They'll let you know what they can do. They're very kind of concrete in the way that they understand themselves. And they can be imaginative as well, though. I'm a princess. But they are, like we've been discussing, children are very vulnerable and very dependent, particularly on their primary caregivers at this point. And also, as we all, I'm sure, have experienced, they can be quite volatile as well. So, moral development. So children think that if they're good, then they won't be punished. So therefore, if they're being punished, then they think that they're bad. But sometimes children are punished when they're not necessarily bad, and this is where complex trauma can evolve from.
And it's the complex trauma that will sit with you, Adam, until you're an adult and deal with it, isn't it?
Yeah. I think trauma presents itself when the opportunity is correct. Like, that's been my experience.
Yeah.
So for instance, if I fly off the handle at my wife for no apparent reason, if I become self-aware, if I am self-aware, then I will go, hang on a second, why did I do that? Let's have a conversation. Let's actually delve into, hang on a second, I've got attachment issues to my mother, the mother of all wounds, my mother wound, and then go through that. I think the biggest issue when it comes to trauma is, I did the Johari window at the residential we were at this weekend, and the subconscious window is where most of the issues come from, because you're not actually aware of why you're behaving unless you ask yourself why you're behaving that way. We haven't been given that and taught that skill. Like, why? What's the why behind my what? We're just like, what? Like, let's figure this out. It's been a journey when it comes to complex trauma, but I It's interesting looking at the physiological side of it in human development, because I've spent most of my time looking at the spiritual aspect, which has led me to the physical side of it, because then you can't, like, you may be able to resolve it within yourself with forgiveness and dealing with bitterness and dealing with all those sorts of things, but then there's the physical expression that's unresolved still.
And it's having like the seemingly, like, you know, reason that, right, flying off the handle for no reason.
Yeah.
You fly off the handle because your limbic brain is stimulated in a particular kind of a way, which makes it seem like it's really important. So
well, what's interesting, Michelle, you might be able to shed some light on this, because you're obviously well versed. So I've been delving into the question. So with my upbringing and my childhood and all that sort of stuff, right? I won't lose my mind if the other month, somebody totaled my car on the side of the road. I was so patient, so kind, so this. But if it's the middle of the night and I'm trying to plug in a PowerPoint and I can't find the PowerPoint, I am losing my
Shit.
Yeah, shit, that's the one. So it's like,
you feel like you're failing, you feel like you're not doing something right, and therefore that you become very overstimulated, and you have this fight or flight response. Cortisol comes, and you like, it's a real thing. Like, so
would that be a part of moral development? Because, like, you know,
yes, because at some point, like, I had a client who was very liked things to be very, like, neat and tidy, and we got to the point at one point where she said that if she spilled milk, and literally if she spilled milk, her dad would make her clean it up and clean it up and clean it up until, you know, for ages after it was actually clean.
Wow.
And so that had followed her all the way through, with almost with things never being able to be clean enough, and it was like she was crying over spilt milk.
Wow.
Shame.
It's pretty, like, it's so simple, but it's so deep.
It's much the same as your not being able to plug the PowerPoint in.
Yeah.
It's about not being able to do something simple right. So, yeah.
Interesting one.
It's also because we often don't want to allow ourselves to fail, and I think that comes deep. You know, you're not allowed to fail. Why am I failing? That's why we have this guilt feeling of,
100%. Let's move on.
Yeah.
I'll go see a counsellor.
Okay, so gender differences. I think we've had a little bit of a talk about this, and I do tend to think that although there are some kind of hormonal and hereditary, and some hormonal and genetic influences on this, that there is a lot of socialisation that goes on in terms of what boys do and what girls do. But obviously at this age, it's like we do have children developing in different ways, and so that's where this preference, or part of probably where this preference for playmates of the same sex comes from at this age. So child abuse, it's a big issue in Australia. Most commonly it's emotional abuse, which is a big reason for complex trauma. You can have, like, trauma theories sort of started from the 1970s with PTSD, but then they realised after they'd analysed it for a bit that you could have two people experiencing the same thing. One would come back with PTSD and another wouldn't, because one would have a better response to it initially and be able to deal with it better than another person, and that this was linked to early childhood. And this is where, you know, trauma and abuse theories started to come through, complex trauma. That some people would just have a better ability to deal with the event than others, depending on what the event was. So, like for you, Adam, it's like if something actually has gone wrong, you have a really good ability to chill and look after the event. Whereas if it's something that kind of triggers you, then you don't. So it's generally girls are more likely to be emotionally abused, and boys are more likely to be physically abused. So we have a few minutes left. I don't want to do the TV watching increases violence, but do you think that nature or nurture is a cause for people to act in particular ways, and particularly aggressive behaviour?
You'd be both and.
Yes.
I think, yeah, I can't really, there's not really a definable line between which one causes X, Y, Z. I think, like what you said just before, the people respond differently. Like, I might have a greater capacity in one area, then Honor might have a greater capacity in another. If you put us in the same situation, one will thrive and one will sink, like, depending on, obviously, our experiences. So yeah, I can't, like, they are different obviously, but they can both produce the same results.
I agree there.
Also model behaviour, yeah. Modelled behaviour.
Behaviour, yes, because I think we've probably all seen, children yell or use language which is kind of, can be kind of unusual, and you wonder where they got that from.
Because I'm not sure if any child is born aggressive. I see aggressiveness as being an unnatural state for someone to be in when they feel not heard, or they feel alone, or they feel sad, or angry. So I kind of am allowing room for a question mark to be over if there's nature involved in that, or if it's purely nurture and the environment. Because I don't feel, I can totally see that there's differences in personalities, and there's like really bold people and really shy people, but I'm not sure if aggressiveness would be part of someone's natural state.
Yeah.
Do you think that some people are more, like some children are more likely to hit other children?
Are they more, sorry?
Some children might be more, do you think that some children are more likely to hit other children?
But what is that?
I
see that as a frustration inside them.
Frustration, yeah. But you don't think that babies experience that frustration?
Yeah, but is that genetic?
Is that aggression, or is that the same?
That's why I'm kind of, I don't know. I think it's interesting to ponder. I'm not sure if there's a definite, I don't know, is there a definite answer? I don't know if there is.
No, there's no definite answers to any of this. These are just things to think on, yeah.
I think we often, when we say aggressive behaviour, you can actually have positive aggressive behaviour as well. Like, I think I like what Anna's saying, because essentially, like, you put your son in a soccer match, you want him to be aggressive. You want him to go for the ball. You want him to kick a goal. You want that. Like, I don't think it's necessarily a negative quality. But if we talk about it negatively, then we do have to place it in a box of nature or nurture. But if it's a positive behavior, like, maybe it is nature. We're more inclined to go, oh, they're naturally more competitive. They're aggressively competitive, or just as an example. But then when you talk about someone's child and you say, oh, they're violent, they're naturally violent, they're naturally aggressive, then that parent's going to be more like, hang on a second, you're saying that the nature of the makeup of my child is inherently evil. Like, that's how I would interpret that, right? Like,
and I don't see children as being born like evil,
Yeah.
So it depends on what the term aggressive, how you mean it exactly.
Yeah, aggressive, frustrated.
Yeah, I feel it's more someone that's frustrated, even a baby that can't communicate. They want that thing, and the thing is, they need to hit whoever is in the way, I guess.
And scream. Like some children are much more chilled out. Some babies are much more chilled out than others. Some babies scream a lot. Some babies are really chilled out.
Do you think they know what they're doing though? Because, like, for instance, every morning Isaiah will wake up at 5 and we'll bring him into our bed, resettle him, and just have that extra hour sleep before he wakes up again. And when he does wake up again, I'm often woken up to a fist pounding on my face, right? Like, just hitting me, going, wake up, wake up, wake up. Now, I would assume that he's not intentionally clenching his fist and punching me in the face to wake me up. That's not his thought. Do you know what I mean? Like,
maybe it is.
I think this is a really interesting conversation, because we're actually talking about how we frame that kind of behaviour, isn't it? It's like the language that we use makes a really big difference, because, you know, my son wakes me up by punching me in the face is very different to my son wakes me up with a clenched fist telling me that it's time for me to wake up now.
Yeah, it's definitely what you perceive from how I convey the message, I guess. But
it's also about how we're thinking about it as well.
True.
You know, Anna was saying before, is it about being frustrated, or is it about being aggressive? It's like, it's about how are we thinking about this? How are we conceptualizing it ourselves, and why are we thinking about it in this way?
He often does it with a smile, just to clarify. I think he thinks it's funny.
But in here, the reason that I didn't want to do question 2 is because it's like it's conflating aggression and violence.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like, I think where we've got to with the conversation here is that it's the same thing, is it?
I think children might become aggressive because their personalities are being suppressed. Who was it that said it? Vygotsky. If you don't praise, or if a child's always being told that they're naughty or they're not performing the way the parent wants them to perform. I think Jung said something about that as well, didn't he, Michelle? That we actually accept a certain kind of behavior as to where we are in our family, what our family position is, what our parents expect of us and stuff. So we take on this persona that we think we need to have to survive in this family and to make our parents happy or the people around us. I have my son and two grandsons and daughter-in-law here, and Zach is our oldest grandson. He's 10 years old, and he is specifically aggressive, and he's aggressive behind your back, where I haven't seen it from his brother or the other two that lives here. And I think it might be because my son has maybe been a bit harsh on the child, and he's not being allowed